to the InnerVerse. It's an illusion.
Welcome to the One Within All to the InnerVerse podcast with me, your host, Chance, as we embark on another consciousness expanding conversation at the cutting edge of knowledge about mind-body wholeness. Over the years, I've explored a great variety of health techniques, technologies, strategies, and modalities, from the mundane to the magical. And in my experience, the best of these have always straddled the line between psychic and scientific realms, as the blending of subjective woo and concrete physicality seems to have the most profound benefits for our psychosomatic systems. Well, one thing nearly all of these sorts of atypical wellness wisdom philosophies have in common is the ubiquitous importance of our first and foremost human technology, the voice itself. In fact, the ology of techne is by definition the words and terms of art that allow and describe our capacity to do and make absolutely anything that requires some amount of language. And it's language that forms the operating system framework through which our conscious mind thinks and our subconscious mind programs our lives. As far back as ancient thinkers like Socrates, the idea has existed that words are to the soul as medicine is to the body, with indefinite and vast potential to heal as well as harm. But what's been left on the table with the pharmacopoeia of rhetoric is the fact that our voices carry more information than just the content of the words they express. The very tone and tenor of our verbalizations is in constant transformation based on the tension and stress held in our biology and beliefs, with profound ramifications no matter your profession, as our communication skills, or lack thereof, will massively impact every walk of life. Here today to help us understand the logos of locution is Deepak Chari of the Chari Center, an engineer and certified biofeedback specialist who uses these innovative biofeedback techniques to help people quickly and easily release stress, anxiety, and unconscious and uncomfortable triggers. Deepak is here to explain the nuance of enunciation and arcanum of articulation in ways that may just turn your phrases in subtle but surprisingly powerful directions. And who among us wouldn't benefit from more power in speaking and better alignment of our full spectrum of thoughts, words, and actions? There is a lot I don't know about the growing field of biofeedback, and I'm excited to explore this work through the lens of Deepak's 15 plus years of experience. But before we get started, I'll remind you to check out the episode description for links to our guest, along with the various ways you can support InnerVerse with many win-win opportunities. And now it's time to upgrade our utterances and unpack our voices out of their box with the Vox Vera therapist and engineer of intonation, Deepak Chari. Welcome to InnerVerse, man, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chance. Thank you for inviting me to your show.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it, man. I'd love to maybe just talk about what's your path, to arrive at biofeedback as a profession. It's kind of not a very common field, I would think. Like, how'd you get there?
Absolutely, Chance. It was a very interesting journey. By trade, I started as an engineer. I have a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science degree in engineering. And in our families in general, in our culture, in Indian culture, it's generally you're an engineer or a doctor or attorney or something of that nature. And so my father was an engineer, so I decided to be an engineer. And my sister went into medicine and became a medical doctor. But since we were kids, my sister and I, we were raised to kind of think in kind of holistic ways, which is the way from ancient ways of India, which goes back to Ayurveda, which goes back even more than 5,000 years. So we were kind of schooled by our mom, who was almost like a natural holistic doctor in natural ways of thinking about health and healing and everything like that. So it was kind of in our DNA. So then later on, fast forward, as I went into college and decided to do engineering.
All right. So we had a little blip in our connection there. Happy Mercury retrograde, everybody. But Deepak, you were just at the point of your story entering college for engineering, and you're walking us through to how that somehow leads us to biofeedback and the voice specialization.
Yes. So in 1999, my sister and I formed the Chari Center of Health, an integrative functional medical center, going to the root cause naturally of whatever medical or even emotional issues there are. We didn't have a solution for the emotional part completely at that time. And I wanted to so badly contribute, because I was working as an engineer in the field, to somehow help in the healing work, but I have no medical background at all. Now, this sounds kind of woo-woo, but I'll tell you anyway. I put my intention to the universe that somehow my gifts and talents in engineering could somehow heal people in some way, but I had no clue how. 2 weeks after I did that, some friends came up to me and said, Deepak, there's this guy who will be speaking in Santa Monica of how your voice reveals everything going on in your subconscious mind, including your limiting beliefs, your any kind of patterns that are holding you back in life emotionally, that are holding you from moving forward. And then I thought, okay, this sounds interesting. So I attended the presentation. When I listened to the presentation, basically he said that your voice is the most powerful aspect of your being. It tells everything going on in every part of you. So, but most importantly, if you can decode that and computerize it, you can actually find out what is actually holding you back and send frequencies to you in a highly advanced way to release those patterns quickly and easily. So after, my God, this is where my technology engineering background can play. So I learned the whole technique and everything. And the first person, though, I worked on before I worked on a single person was myself. Because let me take it back to my childhood, how it all started. When I was growing up as a kid, I was bullied, or at least I perceived I was bullied, for my entire childhood. So I would hide away in the library to escape from these bullies till it was kind of dark outside, and then I would come out. And my entire childhood was spent doing this. And I kind of thought, wow, this pretty much basically sucks, that my whole childhood is spent hiding and running away from these bullies. I go, I hope this ends when I'm an adult. But then as I became an adult, meaning going into high school and so on and so forth, it changed to a different form of bullying. From physical intimidation, it changed to status and class and which group are you in? Are you with the jocks? Are you with this? Are you with the nerds? That kind of thing. I was definitely with the nerds, but I was in a different class. And so I still thought this is not exactly what I was looking for. Then I thought, okay, when I go to college, this will all end, right? But that didn't end, because for my perception, the professors felt that I should do certain things in a certain way in engineering school. Some of them even told me I should be an actor instead of an engineer. And I said, no, but I want to be an engineer. I thought you're supposed to motivate me to be an engineer. So then I said, no, I'm going to show you. So I ended up becoming an engineer against all of that. But I also noticed I was drawing bullying patterns, not only in that area, but in my relationships, in my friends, in my colleagues, in my bosses. I mean, everybody. So you know what I would do, Chance, is I would say, okay, I'm quitting this job. I'm leaving this relationship. I'm leaving all those different situations. And then, but I would go hundreds of, sometimes thousands of miles away to escape this issue. But I would draw the same thing again. The people would look totally different. They may even have a different personality, but the energy of them was still bullying. So I would keep believing all these things. Then I thought, wait a minute. The only common element in all of these situations is me. So I'm like, wait a minute. Then I kind of like, like in the Matrix where they zoom in on the person. Then I go, wait a minute. Wait, if I'm the source, could I be the source of all this stuff? So that was back in my earlier days as I was finishing college. So then that made me on introspection that it must be an inside job, but I still didn't have a solution. So fast forward, when I was back in that presentation, listening to that person talk about how your voice is the most optimal part, telling everything that's going on in your life and basically what's holding you back, but most importantly, how certain frequencies could be sent back to you to release those patterns. I thought, okay, fast forward, maybe I can release this bullying pattern I've had my whole darn life in every area. So the first person, going back to that, what I said before, was that I was going to work on was myself to clear this bullying pattern. The movie The Matrix. It is like a program. I thought I was set. That's how my life was. That's what friends are. That's what relationships are. That's what bosses are. That's how I was dealt a sore deal in life. But it wasn't like that. I was able to delete that matrix programming, the limiting one. And then suddenly I drew wonderful people into my life, wonderful, nurturing, supportive people, loving people. And by the way, Chance, I had no clue what that even was. I didn't even know what that was. So then I found out you can change this, you can delete the old programming and draw stuff in your life that you don't even have a concept of. So once I started doing that, those friends are no longer my friends, but I drew wonderful people in their place and relationships and bosses and supervisors and so on and so forth. So then I thought, wow, if this can do this for me, I'm sure other people I could help with this bullying pattern that I had. So I started working one-on-one with each person. I said, hey, I'm an expert in releasing this bullying pattern. I had it my whole life. And they said, well, it's not really bullying that bothered me, but I had depression my whole life, or I was self-sabotaging. Like I meant well this, but I would do this, or I had some trauma in my life that I was just not able to get over. So I said, okay, well, that wasn't the issue I had particularly, but I'll adapt to it. Maybe there's different frequencies, different patterns I can work with. And so I developed it and polished it. And I was able to work basically any kind of issues what the person had emotionally, some emotional block, or maybe they're successful in other people's eyes. Like, hey, they're super successful. So I talked to them, hey, you must be so happy. They're like, no, I'm totally depressed. I was like, why? You've reached everything that people would dream of. No, I'm here, but I wanted to go here. I'm just hitting a roadblock, a ceiling. I don't know what it is. I'm doing everything I thought I'm supposed to do. So I would listen to their voice and literally decode what that pattern is that they're not even consciously aware of. That's an unconscious, subconscious pattern that's holding them back in their life. And I would sense particular frequencies and harmonics to release that pattern that they didn't know they may have had their whole life. And suddenly I'd say, well, go for what you're doing, trying to go for before. And then suddenly, like, Deepak, I just got this business deal that came out of nowhere. I was just able to just say the right thing at the right time, and all these people wanted to join in on the deal. And all these opportunities that even were lost before for other people suddenly came into fruition. So then I said, wow, this is really amazing. And so I found out your voice is the most accurate reflection of what is going on in your subconscious and conscious mind. And they work like a team. But imagine you got this big, strong muscle guy. That's your subconscious. And you got this little tiny, scrawny, little thin guy. Okay. And that's your conscious mind. If both are battling each other or arm wrestling each other, let's say, who do you think most likely is going to win? Right? This more muscular guy, right? Well, that's your subconscious mind. Meaning like, oh, let's kill the giant, right? Because that's a part of you. It's all a part of you, the subconscious and conscious mind. But the subconscious mind was programmed with limiting patterns of thinking, possibly from your childhood. And that's what I found out, Chance, that all of these patterns ultimately came from the time you're born till the time you're around 13 or 14. And this is research that goes back over 100 years. And it goes back to a person by the name of Alfred Tomatis, who had said, the voice does not speak what it cannot hear. So it basically goes back to all of that pattern that from what we were brought up with. So you might think like, well, Deepak, I'm a different person than my childhood, so that doesn't have any connection to that. Actually, it has 100% connection to everything that's happening in your life. So whatever happened between the time you're born till the time you're 13 or 14, you just absorb it like a sponge. You didn't question it. Especially from the time you're born till the time you're 7, okay? So whatever was said to you, you're stupid, you're slow, you'll never amount to anything. Why can't you be like the neighbor's kid? Look how successful they are, or stuff like that. Then the person thinks like, I must be no good. I really stink at everything. So that
I might not even think that. It just goes in.
It just goes in, right? Because you're right. Because when you're from a tiny age, 0 to 7, even 0 to 14, you don't even know what yourself is. You don't even know who you are, honestly. You don't know who you are till later on, and even then you don't really know who you are,
We're
as I
still
found
figuring
out.
it out.
You're still figuring it out, right? So you don't really know who you are. You think that's who you are. But if someone tells you something, you say, okay, I'm stupid. I'm slow. I'll never amount to anything. I'll be a ditch digger my whole life. And by the way, my clients were actually told this, believe it or not. And other things that are just unbelievable. So the kid at that time absorbs it and says, okay, that's who I am. Now, even though they may be very logical, they may have 5 PhDs and all of that and go to so many top universities, they'll still go back to this original programming, you see. And all their decisions and business decisions and relationship decisions and whatever decisions go back to that original programming from 0 to 14. So when I work with a client, I actually help decode that original programming, which was the source code that led to all the situations they had. I will first help diffuse the emotional issues that are going on in their current life, but then I will track it back to the source code of what caused it. For example, if someone started a fire, even 5 fires, usually 5 fires, you put out fire 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then another 5 fires appear. I lived in California before, so I can relate to this analogy. So when they would actually keep putting out these fires, then someone had to ask, like, okay, wait a minute, these fires keep coming, what's going on? There must be a source somewhere else. Arson. And this actually happened in California. So then they finally tracked it back to the original source of it, because they can put out as many fires as they want, but if they don't go to the source, it'll never stop. And so finally they're able to find that. The source of our fires, our emotional upheavals, so to speak, and emotional challenges and reactivities comes from our childhood and our upbringing. It actually starts from the time of conception, believe it or not, from the time your parents decide to conceive you. Now, this is incredible, but DNA is DNA. So in other words, if your mom and dad had some issues going on within themselves and with each other, those unresolved emotions in that moment when they procreate us goes right into your DNA right away in your cellular memory. Okay, so that's phase 1. I found there's 4 phases. Phase 2, you're in your mom's womb for 9 months, and whatever your mom is thinking or feeling or issues she's having with your dad at the time, fights, arguments, whatever, you pick all that up. That's phase 2. Phase 3, you're now born into the world. Hey, I'm born. But now you have the direct interface with those parents and even grandparents.
You could even say that the being born moment itself, the actual birth experience, is its own entire phase in terms of influence.
You are correct. Was it a smooth birth? Was it a C-section? Was it a painful birth? Whatever. Because whatever your mom is feeling, you're feeling it too, right? And
how people I work with in biofield tuning, I can very often pick up on whether they were born C-section. And the most typical, general adaptation or conditioning that they don't realize they've picked up from that birth experience is something along the lines of a sort of guilt complex or not good enough complex, especially for men towards women, needing their approval. And it has to do with this, I hurt mom by coming out, the way that I was born. But there's other ways that it can manifest, and you have to kind of investigate their psyche, but just that birth trauma is huge. And then everything you're saying about the pre-birth part of conditioning is absolutely accurate too, and is readable in the human energy field.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one other point I was going to mention, Chance, is that not only are a certain percentage, I should say, of the unresolved emotions of each parent downloaded to that newly formed kid that's, basically between the sperm and the egg just starting to form, but even the unresolved emotions and ways of thinking of the grandparents on both sides, also a certain percentage from each of them also downloads. So that's even the deeper part of this equation. So people will often say to me, well, Deepak, my grandparents, died before I was born. I didn't even know who they were. But in my analysis, I'll be able to actually tell them and quantify something that's normally hard to quantify, what kind of percentage of those patterns they got from those grandparents. And sometimes it's even more than they got from their parents. So, for example, how many times, and I've seen this, maybe you have too, You see a grandkid, right? And the grandkid just acting the way they are. But, I've seen it a lot where some people say, did you notice how little Johnny's acting just like his grandpa Jim? He walks like him. He kind of talks in that sort of manner. He kind of has that same personality of him. But remember, he didn't even know who Grandpa Jim was because Grandpa Jim died 10 years before he was born. So how in the heck could he act like him? Well, that's something mysterious, but not really. It was a pattern that was downloaded because the DNA is like a cloud. It's like an iCloud of different DNA patterns. So it's in the field, okay? It's like the book, The Field. It's in the energetic field. So even though they passed away.
It doesn't even have to necessarily be conceived of as DNA. It's just part of this.
I use the word DNA. Well, yeah. What would you call it?
Well, I think it's in terms of these patterns, they represent like memory that's stored and transferred generationally. And neuroscience has yet to produce any kind of even slight clue of a concrete location in the brain or elsewhere physically that memory lives in the body, apart from particular forms of muscular tension that have a type of biological memory to them. But it's really that memory is in the energy that's holding the tension, not in the musculature itself as like a cellular component, in my opinion, because biofield tuning is my other gig, and I can wave a tuning fork around someone's energy field and find out, the type of experience or emotional repression they have at the specific age that it happened. But this information is off the body. It's in the electromagnetic field around the body. So that's where I think memory is at. Actually, I think memory is contained in the flow or lack thereof of the subtle energy of the body, but there is a quantifiable element to it. I mean, it's a bioplasma. It's electromagnetic. There's definitely a there.
Yeah, right on. That's exactly what I meant. I'm not meaning a specific part of your actual physical memory because that's a very, very small portion of the whole thing. And when I say subconscious, by the way, subconscious is not, some people think, oh, you mean in here? I said, no, not at all. Subconscious could be every cell you're being, inner, outer, everywhere. It does not mean, it's not localized anywhere. The conscious mind, yes, that is in there. But that's the part that's trying to figure out the other 99.9%. So you're right, it's in the field, but you're a part of that field, you see. So whatever unresolved issues your grandparents had on both sides and your parents, immediately a certain percentage gets downloaded into your energetic field as you're being formed in the time of conception. So that's already phase one. So that's already done. That's already done. So phase two, you're in your mom's womb for 9 months. Phase three, and you're picking up whatever your mom is thinking or issues she's having with your dad or upsets and frustrations in her own life. Maybe she wanted to jet set around the world and do all these things. And then she's pregnant with you. She's like, oh, there's my modeling career. It's totally done now. Now I have to, I'm kind of stuck. I can't do all these things I want to do. If she was thinking that, that frustration would go into you. And guess what? What do you think that feeling might be? Oh my God, I'm the one who blocked mom from doing all the things she wanted to do. So it's my fault because I was born. I'm actually a hindrance to the whole thing. And I'm the problem. See?
Or it could be some kind of pattern of like, there's things that I wish for, long for, and want, but that I don't believe I could ever have, or other circumstances constantly interfere with me expressing that desire. But I will add a caveat too, to what you're saying. There's a little bit of almost like soul choice aspect to what is and isn't picked up in forms of conditioning, which is interesting to me because it's like the whole spectrum of, a pregnant mom is going to go through the whole spectrum of emotions. It's the things that are most chronic that are most likely to transfer to the baby. But one way to like lift out of feeling maybe victimized by improper parenting or ill-prepared mothering or pregnancy and all that is that on a soul level, in my opinion, we choose the parents that we choose to go through the particular challenges that birth is going to allow for us or create for us. So it's even like on the highest level, there's like a free will choice to the particular, trickiness of a life story. And what is and isn't transferred can be, I wouldn't say random. I think that's where the free will part that I'm talking about comes from. But I like to make that point because I don't want, parents out there or someone who's going to be a mother someday to add extra layers of stress about like, oh, I can't have even one sad feeling while I'm pregnant. I'm going to mess up my baby. Like these things happen. I mean, we can kind of track them, but there's also a mystery to it. And there's also like an element of this is just part of life, and that's okay. Right. Like I don't want people to be, I don't want people to avoid having children over being afraid that they're going to mess their kids up with their own unhealed patterns. Cause we're all always working through new layers of all this stuff. Right.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just mentioning the general concept of what actually goes on. And if we go by
you're doing a great job fleshing it all out too. This is great.
Oh, thank you. And if we go by the concept, it was something chosen. The only thing is the kid doesn't know that, at that time, I mean, when they're in the birthing process. So, so basically this is the interesting other point I wanted to mention. I've worked with twins also. You have two identical twins. They have the same DNA. Two twins have the same DNA. They wear the same clothes. They go to the same school. They have the same friends. They have the same everything. But I've worked with them. And one twin exceeds in life. The other one goes into, let's say, the dark side or drugs or whatever it may be. How could that be? Same parents, same nurturing. Okay, this goes back to what you were just sharing with me. Now it's a choice, right? Now you might think like, well, how could that be it? Everything's DNA, everything's the same. But this is the other part. And this goes back to what you said. Though those two kids will get a different percentage download for each of the parents and grandparents. And it's based on their own constitution as well. So in other words, if one parent, let's say, is more tougher on the kid later on as the kid grows up, that other kid might be more sensitive overall. Okay. So he takes it like, oh my God, dad was so hard on me. Oh my God. Another kid's like, yeah, dad's like that. What can you do? You just got to let it roll off your back. The first kid lets it roll off his back. He doesn't like it, but he says, well, I'm just going to be tough about it. And the other one's like, oh my God, my life is ruined. He said, he's so tough on me. So these could be identical twins. So it's also based on their own constitution within. So yeah, in what you said. So two twins, identical twins, could have a total different percentage of how much they take in and what they process and how they perceive from each of those parents and grandparents. So once that happens, okay, now the kid is born into the world, and now they have, like I was saying, the direct interface with the parents and or sometimes grandparents too. So whatever the parent tells the kid is literally goes right in without any evaluation of any sort. It's just like the gospel truth. Like whatever you tell me, I will perceive it and just take it in my own way for each kid. Let's say if there's more than one kid. So then the next phase is phase 4, where you take all those patterns in your life, and later on, because 0 to 14 is the key imprinting age, after that, you literally create that in your own world, whatever patterns you picked up and how you perceive it. You create those same situations that your parents probably most likely had in your own life, a similar kind of situation. And thus this repeats into the next generation.
You externalize your beliefs. You externalize your beliefs and the repressed shadow emotions. They come back, they boomerang back to you in the outer world. Totally.
That is exactly right. So in the same way I was describing earlier, I was bullied as a kid. Well, I found out later on my parents were also in that similar situation when they were going through school. I didn't really know much about all the details of that, but I found out later on. So that pattern had repeated. But fixed, Chance, nothing is fixed. Like, oh my God, my life is screwed up. I was raised in this way and I had a rough parenting or I had a rough childhood or whatever. You might have had it, but it might have made you stronger as a person. Maybe maybe there's something you gained from it. But the good news is, like when I work with clients, I'm able to clear the heavy emotional charge of whatever they internalized. Like two kids could have a totally different version of that. And then once that's released, they'll be able to see it much clearer from a totally different perception and a totally different understanding. And they'll actually feel empowered by whatever even rough upbringing they had. So nothing is fixed. Nothing is stuck. You're not stuck forever. It's nothing like that. So that's the good news. And you can become stronger and even a stronger person than you even originally were as a result of even how that all happened. And that's what I found as I work with clients. I help to take out that emotional, like, boatload of charge out of them. And so they are able to see it clearly for what it is without the emotional charge. And then they're able to make better decisions, which leads them in a totally different direction from where they might have been going.
All that totally jives with the way that I experience this stuff with clients in my particular modality, which is probably not super different. I mean, we're finding the subconscious belief feedback loops and changing at least how we interpret those areas of our life, or just changing our consciously held belief altogether to revise what the subconscious, like, you can give your subconscious instructions, and until you do, it's going to run the last instructions that it received. I'm thinking of an example, somebody I worked with probably over a year ago, but it's one that stuck with me, where as we were investigating sort of the energetic conditioning around her birth experience, we dug into how her mom had like 4 or 5 miscarriages before she had the client that I was working with. And my client was trained in traditional Chinese medicine. So she had this idea that she had picked up from school that whenever the mother has a child or even a miscarriage, that there's like a depletion of a certain amount of vital force. I don't know which kind of chi it is, but it's one of the types of chi. And so she was carrying this idea in her unconscious that we uncovered, that because of the previous string of miscarriages, that she was going to just be of weak and poor health and constitution and bad at managing stress, and just like, a weaker person, generally speaking. And it was kind of easy. All we had to do was just flip it and say, what if instead of all of those miscarriages before you were born, meaning that you're weakened, what if it means you were the strong one? What if that means you're you're the one that was stronger than all those other ones? You're actually superior because of it, not inferior. And, kind of simplifying the outcome of that session. But it's like that.
Absolutely, Chance. Right on. Yes. So what you're saying is that you're able to shift that woman's perception of how she felt she was to a completely new, strong perception of herself, which is awesome. And yes, we have different paths leading to the same result, and there's different ways to do it. And yeah, I mean, that's right on. So you transferred something from like, oh, I'm nothing, I'm weak, and I don't have any power, to like, wait a minute, maybe I'm the strongest one of them all.
Yeah. And that sometimes can do the trick. I mean, there's more nuance than that, but what I'm really curious about from what we've talked about up to this point, and, the sort of patterning of internal conditions, externalizing as life patterns, is something my audience is probably going to be pretty familiar with because of what I do and often reference. But I want to know about the actual frequency work itself. Like, how did you know or decide what frequencies to use for what kind of issues? Was this something that you had to kind of R&D based on collecting people's vocal patterns alongside their professed problems or life experiences? Or like, how did you arrive at what works? That's what's always mystified me, is concluding that a certain frequency is good for a certain issue. I've never quite been able to get there on my own or discover anything like that, other than that coherent frequencies themselves are beneficial, but like targeting specific things to specific frequencies, I don't quite know a lot about, or I want to know how you got there, because that's very curious for me.
Yeah. Well, let's also look at it from this point of view. There's general frequencies that are beneficial for every human, but every person is, if you think about it, like when you see a snowflake, right? And if you're in the East Coast or New York, wherever, when you see a snowflake, you think they're all the same, but every snowflake is unique, right? Every single snowflake, it's hard to imagine, is completely unique crystalline structure. So each of us as humans is a unique crystalline structure. So there may be some general frequencies that are beneficial overall for certain organs or certain body systems and even emotions. But still, I have found that, and this is not my own research, this is like based on 100 years of data, that certain frequencies and notes are beneficial for certain different emotions. And I'm focusing more on the emotional side versus the physical side, since that's kind of what my work is. But also I have found that a certain note for one person that may be beneficial for a certain emotional issue may not be necessarily the same note for another person.
So are you?
So when I do, so certain notes for certain people may be beneficial for some people, but not as beneficial for another person, even though it's close to that note. And that's because each person is unique and different. So when I do an analysis on someone's voice, I'll listen to their voice as they talk about certain topics. I will find out for them what their most deficient note is. Okay, the notes I don't hear in their voice that I should have heard. So if you imagine a piano, right, there's hundreds of keys, right? Now, you don't need to know music theory, but there's basically 12 keys that repeat, okay? And those are octaves. So even though you say hundreds of keys, even though there's hundreds of keys on a piano, there's only 12 notes that repeat. So I'm listening for the notes I don't hear versus the ones I do. And some notes I will hear louder than others, okay? So if they're in a mid-range range, they're okay. But if they're really low, like I can barely hear them or I don't hear them at all, that means certain emotions, particular emotions, are squashing certain notes of their voice from being heard. So then what I help to do is help them to raise that note that I don't hear, which will in turn balance that emotional issue that they had: anger, sadness, depression, grief, self-sabotage, fear, worry, doubt, low self-esteem, low self-worth, those kinds of things. You see what I'm saying? So even though there might be some general applications of, this note is good for this person, when I measure that person's voice, I'll say, well, not exactly. Maybe off a one note for this particular person. So by listening to their voice specifically, Chance, I can tailor down for that person specifically what musical note or notes they will need to balance out whatever emotional challenges, blocks, or emotional triggers that they're having in their life.
Okay, so this is tailored to the individual. You're not applying frequencies based on what they tell you, but based on what the actual sound spectrum is in what they say, in the
Correct.
vocalization itself.
It's very targeted, right? So
is this more based on musical notes or on like frequency ranges in terms of like in a numerical sense?
Which is actually frequency if you really look at it for the musical note.
Right.
So for example, a C has a certain frequency than a C sharp or a D. So yes, it isn't based on frequency. And in fact, if they're low in a certain note, I can either have different programs, but one of my starting programs is they can actually sing the note. Now I'll give that to them as a homework note. I will actually send a song in that key that they're low in, or that I didn't hear the note at all of, and they just simply listen to that music in that key that I didn't hear their voice in, and they can hum, which actually increases the effectiveness tremendously for about 10 minutes or so with that note that they're hearing in the song that I don't even hear from their voice. And the rest of the time, it's a 20-minute track, they can just listen to the music in the background. So what it's doing is it's resonating that note so that it actually starts being louder. Let me give you an example. Let's say I have two pianos next to each other, okay? Piano A and piano B. I don't touch piano B, but on piano A, I hit the note A. Now, if I put somebody's putting their ear near piano B, they will actually hear that note A resonate on the second piano. The string will vibrate. Well, how could that be? It's a process known as sympathetic resonance. That same note on piano A will resonate the string on piano B. That same note. That's why likes attract, okay? That's why limiting patterns also attract, for that matter. So if that note resonates, if that note is not heard in their voice, by resonating the note that is, so we say, stuck, or where that emotion is sitting on that key, We'll reverse engineer it. We'll get that key to play, regardless of whatever that emotional issue is that they don't really know how to resolve. And when we get that key to play, then whatever emotion was squashing that note from being played cannot coexist in an otherwise harmonized environment. So by that, I'll be sending them, or they'll be listening to that particular frequency of sound in a specific wavelength and singing with it, ideally to get the most benefit, because then they're getting tuned, literally tuned like a piano or a guitar, to the correct note that they should be, like piano B I was talking about. So that resonance is there. Once that resonance of that note, which I will measure, let's say in a week follow-up or 2 weeks follow-up with them, I'll listen to their voice again, talking about the challenging situation. Now I'll hear that note much better. Maybe it improved a lot. So I may just continue with that same exercise on that same note, or maybe I'll say, okay, now that note is pretty good, I notice this note needs a little bit polishing. So I'll give you a different note to listen to and sing with also, and hum. So then it's suddenly that note will actually be heard later on, even a day later, even sometimes an hour later, I'll actually hear that note that I didn't hear. But what's interesting, Chance, is that emotional issue will start resolving, that angst, that anger, that fear, that worry. But that's even associated with different organs and systems in the body, which I don't particularly work on per se, as my sister does as a medical doctor. But those issues tend to be resolved issues, and resolved also, like maybe thyroid issues or whatever. Those tend to also get resolved inadvertently as we're taking care of the emotions.
And there was just a little blip there, but you said digestive issues. That's okay. I just wanted to give that context to the audience. What you're describing is really powerful sympathetic resonance. It's a universal law. And I like that your strategy isn't just that they're hearing the deficient frequencies, but also vocalizing them, because that can be really powerful. I remember when I first started working with tuning forks, just experimentally, I was going to be on this podcast that was like, I think starting at 11 p.m. or later, very late for me. I don't usually want to go try to be on my A game at that hour. Right. And in this particular instance, I also had a cold all day where my voice was scratchy and it had a headache, and I just felt kind of out of it and foggy mentally. And I didn't want to cancel this appointment. I wanted to still appear on the show, and kind of worried about it all day. But as it approached, I think maybe 30 minutes before it was supposed to begin, I got some of my tuning forks and would strike them and then vocalize to try to harmonize my voice to the fork. And I did this for maybe like 10 or 15 minutes, and I could feel the strength of my voice improving and improving, and my mental clarity improving and improving, to the point where once I went on the show, it was like I never had a cold. And I gave one of my best interviews up to that point. I felt like I was perfectly in the flow state, and it was incredible. So from that point, I was like, okay, there's definitely something to this. And sympathetic resonance is a good way to consider that. I also like to give the example of, it's not exactly sound, but it is frequency, an example of how frequency works, and the ordering principle or syntropic quality of the universe, that you put a bunch of metronomes in a room together and you set them off at different times. So they're all ticking differently. And you leave the room and come back after a long enough amount of time, they're all going to be ticking in exact resonance with each other perfectly at the same moment. Tick tock, tick tock. So there's something about about our universe that, mainstream physics wants you to, or they tend to believe that everything is slowly dying in entropic, slow heat death and, dissolving. That disorder and chaos is encroaching upon us at all times until we inevitably, are destroyed by it. But there's also an ordering principle to the universe, which is quite obvious to anybody that looks around and sees the great amount of beauty and harmony that exists naturally. That there's some kind of principle to our reality that when dissonance and harmony, or order and disorder, are paired together, the order entrains the disorder just naturally. Or, give it enough time and it will happen. That's why somebody that is like a really high charge, vibrant, harmonious person, they walk into a room of glum people, and if their vibe is good enough, it turns the whole room around, like just kind of automatically. That's the type of energy that we all want to be able to carry. And it does start with our voice. And it sounds like your tech is like really interesting way to approach this particular kind of, I want to call it a shortcut, but it's actually like, it's just the correct path more than a shortcut.
Yeah, because ultimately everything starts from sound. If you think about it, even the creation of the universe started with sound. If we go by the concept of Om, you've heard of that sound Om, right? That has hundreds and hundreds of frequencies in that one sound. And everything was created from that. First was the spoken word, right? Or the sound, in other words. And then everything formed from there, right? So if I go by that concept, if everything comes from sound, ultimately, even emotions and thoughts and concepts and all of that ultimately came from sound originally. So I'm just looking at it from the core, from the raw area of the sound. And if there's imperfections of sound or no sound or things are out of tune, so to speak, that's what I'm restoring. I'm restoring everything to be in tune. So just like a guitar or an instrument that's out of tune, you play like if I go to piano, okay, and you say, Deepak, I can sort of play piano. Play me my favorite song. I'll say, Chance. And you say, okay, Chance, I'll play your favorite song. And I start playing it. And it's your favorite song. You go, Deepak, it sucks. Stop playing that song. But Chance, this is your favorite song. I don't get it. Why do you hate this song? It's your favorite song. The way you're playing it, it just sounds horrible. I say, well, let me see. Oh, I know what it is. The piano is 250 years old. A lot of the keys are stuck on the piano and out of tune as well. So even though I'm playing your favorite song, it's actually irritating you. So guess what? When we're speaking and those notes are also stuck or maybe out of tune a little bit, even though we're saying something good to other people or motivating or we think it's nice, that other person, not everyone, but certain people will get triggered by that and take it the wrong way. Have you ever experienced that before? You're talking to someone, it's happened to me, and then suddenly you think they're going to get what you're saying and they don't quite get it. In fact, they might even be irritated what you say. And you're going, how the heck could you be irritated by that? It's not what you said. It's the energy of how it was pronounced and how it was said. And so therefore, by taking care of that situation.
I always say about this podcast that the vibe is more important than the information.
Yeah.
I mean, they're kind of like the information and the vibe, they go together. The information won't matter if the vibe is wrong.
That is so right on. You couldn't have said it better. And I can't say it better than that either, Chance. And that's because the vibe coming out of you, like I'm playing your favorite song, it's your favorite song, but you can't stand it because of how the energy is coming out from there. So likewise, that's how people are misinterpreted or no, they didn't understand what I was saying, Deepak. What I was saying was this. I said, I know, but your energy is coming out like this. I've worked with a lot of top singers and actors and authors and speakers. They already have coaches, but they still are not able to get their energy out to the audience the way they want or not get the response from the audience the way they want. So when I work with them, restoring it in this process I'm describing to you, they suddenly get the voice they never had before. And they're just knocking it out of the park. And it's all because I'm literally helping to get the frequencies balanced and releasing those emotions that were squashing those keys that they held, from previous programming from their childhood and throughout their life. And thus their voice is now really heard and they're really seen like they've never been before. So many times, a lot of my clients are women say to me, Deepak, I'm saying all my stuff to people, but it's like I'm not even seen or heard. I have some great ideas that would have saved the company millions of dollars. They didn't listen to me. They went ahead with their own approach, not listening to mine, and they lost all this money. If they listened to me, they would have saved it. I said, well, you know what? As I listen to your voice, I'm not hearing all the notes in your voice just as you're talking to me. Let's work on that. So I worked on it, resolved the issue. I said, go and tell them your new idea. She goes, well, they didn't listen to me before. I said, well, you're not the same person. I'm hearing you in a totally different way, an empowered way. She then said, I have some suggestions. You could improve this and this in the company. They're going, oh my, Jane, these are great ideas. You should have shared some ideas with us before because we would have saved millions of dollars in that previous deal. And she was like, yeah, I did. But they didn't hear her, you see. This time they heard her right away. And they, of course, took on her ideas and she was promoted. My point being that you can say all the things you want, but if you're not heard, literally then you're not going to be received by them, by the other people. And then this goes back to being programmed. Maybe you don't feel you deserve to be seen or heard, or maybe you don't think what you say is important from your childhood upbringing. So that's what I help to release and clear.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. I run into similar situations in the energy field too. It seems that the speaking but not being heard energy hangs out on the right side of the throat, kind of in the front right quadrant, interestingly enough. But I wanted to ask about, like, the too easy to be true question. As I'm sure this comes up, like, this seems too easy. And why, to add context to that, how much effort is required to maintain the positive shifts that come along with this? Because, you can tune an instrument, but later on the weather conditions will cause that wood to warp and you got to retune the guitar. And it's kind of similar with our thinking patterns, that if we go back to old ways of thinking, it can undo energy work that we've improved on in the past. I mean, it's not permanent damage, but I guess I want to know, like, what kind of longevity do these shifts have? And do they require people to make very conscious psychological shifts for longer term benefits?
Well, think of it this way, Chance. You're an evolving being. You're not like a robot. Although I love AI to a certain extent, AI is also limited in other ways. You're an evolved being with consciousness, and which the robots don't have, and so much other great things, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. You're constantly evolving. So since you're constantly evolving, you're moving to higher levels each time. So, and even maintenance, right? So for example, if you're working out every day, if you start working out, if you say, Deepak, I've been working out, I'll work out for 48 hours in a row, nonstop, so that I don't have to work out for the rest of the year and the year after that and the year after that. I'll say, well, that's a nice plan, but that's not going to work. You don't even have to work that crazy. You don't have to work 48 hours in a row. Just be consistent. Spend a half hour to an hour every day, just toning up a little bit. You do a little bit extra in the beginning, like when we're cleaning house, like I'm doing with these clients, and getting everything restored harmonically. But then after that, you come in for maintenance every once in a while, maybe once a month. If some upcoming thing is coming up, you want to get ready for it, maybe once in 2 weeks. But you just kind of keep that maintenance going. For example, we take care of our cars more than we take care of ourselves, right? You do your oil change, your oil, lube, and filter every 3 or 4 months. And then you do the big time maintenance, and you change the tires balance the wheels after 6 months, and then 1 year. You don't question that, because you could have the best car on the earth, the best in the world. But if you don't change the oil, you don't do the maintenance, it's going to crash. It's going to stall on the side of the road. I don't care how good the car is. Well, same thing. We're much more than a car, obviously. We're much more evolved than that. So maintenance is also important because we're constantly evolving. Like the different ways, like to become a black belt, you have to go through many sub-levels, right? Each level is very powerful, but you're evolving to new skill levels. So then you just keep updating with that also to go to the next level. So it's kind of like that. So maintenance is important, but it's, once you create the shift, the maintenance is not very difficult. It doesn't take as much time. Just in the beginning, when we're trying to clear those patterns, we want to get the instrument tuned. If you're maintaining the instrument, like, you don't have to start from ground zero and okay, I've got to tune every single note now from ground zero. Like you said, the weather and other stuff can affect it. Things in our life happen, right? Somebody yells at you suddenly someone does something to you, or you get fired from a job, or something suddenly happens. It might affect your notes a little bit in your voice. But if we were doing this work, it might have dropped maybe 20, 30%. Come in for a session with me, we'll get that back up to par. Things happen as we move along, but then you'll be stronger. Now you'll be ready to face things like that in the future, and you'll become stronger from it versus being depleted from it. So maintenance is important, but like once a month, things like that is basically what I recommend, or once in a couple months. Just like with anything else, like you're tuning up your body, getting in shape, that kind of thing.
And so, if I'm not mistaken, this is something that once you kind of created the custom package of what to work on for the individual, that they can do on their own, right? They're going to actually have a device at home that is part of this deal? I'm kind of left that out, like what the actual experience is for the client.
I have different tier levels of programs, but I have a different tier levels of program, but in the baseline program, which is very powerful, what I will do is I will listen to their voice and I'll find out what specific notes they need to listen to enhance that note and bring it back up to par. So I can actually hear it versus a minimal level. I can hear it at the bounce level that needs to be, because, certain emotions were squashing that note from being heard. And, so I will have them, I'll say, I'm going to your homework, I'm going to email you these particular music pieces to listen to in the key of the note that they needed enhanced in their voice. That was too low in their voice. So when they listen to that music, I'll say, I want you to sing with that, or hum or sing with that note that you hear. And I'll even take it further. I'll say, there's a tuner app that they can free that they can download to their phone, so that while they're humming that note that they're hearing in the headset, they don't have to be a professional singer. It'll make sure they're singing it to that exact note. It'll actually say the note that they need to. So that's
what makes it biofeedback. That's the feedback part of it.
That's correct. Yeah, that's the feedback they're going to get. Like, oh yeah, I am singing it correct. Yeah, I'm hearing that. Am I singing the right note? Oh, I'm off a little bit. Oh, okay. Okay, I got it now. So as they practice that, they'll go, oh, okay, I think I got it now. Yeah, now when I sing it consistently, the tuner is saying I'm singing that correct note. So they do this for about 10 minutes a day, and the rest of the time they can just listen to the music in the background. But this will actually create a shift, and their whole personality will start to change. And I won't go into the physiological, but I've also seen that happen. But I'm not a medical doctor, but I have seen that happen too, because the emotions are related. Certain emotions we hold in certain organs. Like, for example, anger is generally held in the liver, and fear might be held in different organs, the spleen, or and sadness might be held in the lungs, in general. There's some
physiological shifts are real, dude. Like, I'm not a medical doctor either, but I've worked on people's I've worked on reintegrating stuck and off balance third eye energy for a number of clients that then resulted in them having improved eyesight, sometimes throwing away their glasses. So,
wow.
Yeah,
that's
all
great.
in the mind.
It's true. Yeah, no,
your mind isn't in your body. Your body is in your mind. That's the sort of metaphysics shift that most of Western culture has yet to catch on to. But once you get there, it's, all of a sudden you're making progress rather than feeling like you're constantly victimized by this so-called outer world that's actually inside you the whole time.
That's exactly right. Yeah. As you beautifully stated, the outer world's actually inside you the whole time. And in fact, the outer world's a reflection, which I was calling your subconscious, which is not actually a physical part of you. It's your whole field of those patterns I talked about that you picked up from your childhood originally, and their history. So yeah, as you change that internally within yourself, that programming, so to speak, or you delete that old limiting one and you attract the stronger one, your outer world will reflect that immediately. I mean, I've seen at least, or within a soon time period, as soon as that vocal part is, gets optimized from not being heard to being heard, then you'll suddenly be seen, heard, and acknowledged. Opportunities will come in your lap. Things will just start flowing. You don't even have to say, what I found with this work I'm doing with clients, you don't even have to say mantras or affirmations. And you can, but when you tune it from the inside, literally tune it from the inside, things just start happening on autopilot. That previous matrix programming, limiting matrix programming, is released or deleted and replaced with the higher level programming, like you said. And and I've seen physiological things improve as a result too. So it's pretty awesome what can happen here.
Yeah, this would be a great time to have a little bit of specific results examples. I'm thinking of, you're talking about those external things happening, estrangements becoming rectified. This is not the only time it's ever happened, but just recently, a client that I have, we went through about 4 sessions and we were working around the particular issues with this individual's mother who had blocked them, and they were estranged completely, had no way to contact the mother, which is hard for me to even reckon, your own child, but that was the circumstance. And in the 4th session, we finally got to the root of like, what were the problematic motivations towards, creating the cognitive dissonance around a reconciliation? Like, what was the incorrect motivation about the reconciliation potential? Without giving too many personal details, we sorted that out, flipped that to what is a more healthy reason for reconciliation, if you want to put it that way. And less than 2 days later, the mother reaches out and contacts them for the first time in years. And I don't know if like they're not necessarily reconciled, but like, the bridge is now there that was completely obliterated before. And these are the sort of things like you can't, in a scientific laboratory sense, say that isn't a coincidence. But when you come around to the way of thinking that it's all in here anyway, then there's not such a thing as coincidence. It's simply, synchronicity. But yeah, let me bring up slide 1. Is that what you want?
Yeah, I mean, slide 1 and also the last one. Yeah, that kind of shows like a brief thing of what I was talking about in the work I do with this advanced voice biofeedback. And then if you were to go to the last slide, that kind of shows, if you're open to that how people can find out more about my work. Yes, I do a complimentary, 15-minute consult by Zoom or phone, whichever you like. And I can even, listen to their voice and tell them a little bit about themselves and, how I can help them in whatever areas they want to address in their life. So I just thought I would share that if they want to find out more about my work, basically.
Cool, man. And I hope people out there that are resonating with this idea take you up on a consult. Very cool. Any closing thoughts you have for our audience as we're wrapping up here today, Deepak?
Well, thank you, Chance. Well, basically this, to all of your viewers, no matter what you've been going through in your life, no matter how hard you've been feeling you're struggling or you're kind of stuck and just know that nothing is fixed and you weren't given a raw deal. This happened for a reason. You were on a path for this reason. As Chance said, you kind of chose this indirectly without realizing it. It wasn't meant to hurt you. It was to make you stronger. And if you need help in, getting those roadblocks out of the way and finding what those are and how to clear them, I can help guide you and take you there. But don't feel that it's a raw deal and this is how your life is and that's the end of it. No, nothing is fixed. Nothing is permanent. There's always a way out, and it's always going to make you more stronger and more empowered than you ever were. And if you need help along the way, I can help you there.
Beautiful. It's been great getting to know you, and I love learning about this biofeedback technique. I think that there's a lot of good potential there. So keep doing what you're doing, and thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Chance. Thank you.
All right. Mercury retrograde, not going to stop us. I mentioned that because you probably picked up on some of the connection blips that we had in this conversation. And at the beginning of our meeting, that kind of chewed up some of the allotted time, which is why the plus extension might be a little shorter than the full hour. But I think that we got the picture. I think we get the gist. And overall, we ought to be quite happy to add another one of these fascinating psychosomatic, holistic mind-body healing modalities to our toolkit, or our potential toolkit, things that we know about. I mean, it makes perfect sense. The reason I wanted to talk to Deepak after a mutual client of ours pointed out his work to me was that, first of all, I've never had a guest on. I've heard of biofeedback, but I've never had a guest on to talk about it before. I was also intrigued in the engineering innovation of this modality. I mean, he alluded to some previous research that already existed that he built this method out of, but I always like when somebody figures out their way of doing it, does it for themselves, and then applies it to others. I mean, that's how kind of it worked for me with biofield tuning. I mean, I learned about the theory and then put it into practice for myself and figured out my way of doing it. Might not be the way that the certified tuner does it. Overall, though, when I can have this kind of conversation and we can compare notes and how the mind-body connection works, I think there's always a lot of profit and benefit there. Now, if you're curious about hour 2, the contents were pretty fascinating. I mean, we just built on what we were already talking about, of course, but we began with a pretty profound success story that Deepak shared of one of his clients that I thought exemplified the dynamics of the sacral chakra to such an extent that I was able to accurately predict some of the physiological problems this person was having, just solely based on the way that his like mental, emotional rejection dynamics were going. So kind of proves the biofield anatomy right there. And since we're talking about voice stuff, I just couldn't help but ask what he thought about RFK Jr. talking like a frog being tortured. Because there's an example of somebody who says everything that you want to hear, more or less, but has got such skeletons in their closet in terms of like, previous wives, suicides and all that. When you put it into context of how in this discussion we demonstrate that the people in our life are reflections and externalizations of our inner world, it becomes quite prickly to think about a guy like RFK and whether or not he's really saying what he means. But Deepak didn't comment on him specifically, but we did discuss the energetic dynamics of the throat chakra in a way that I found very helpful and constructive. We discussed how his practice has developed his intuitive skills. We deconstructed the secret, kind of like the Western society cult of positive thinking and how to properly process negative emotions, what that actually looks like. Deepak talked about some cases involving the turning around of addictive and suicidal tendencies. And we had a great big metaphysical philosophical discussion about how an individual's own choice for wholeness and wellness affects the entire world. Good stuff. I'm glad that we did this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want part 2, you know where to go. My Patreon or my Rockfin or the YouTube channel membership. All those are valid ways to get the plus extensions of all these episodes. And I appreciate everyone who's already doing it and supporting me and my little family. I don't know if you can hear it, but speaking of vocalizations, I can, from the other room here, our little 6-week-old giving some vocalization to some frustration or other. It's kind of the only way they can communicate. My wife always likes to say that the reason why babies are so loud is because they don't have any tension in their body. That would have been an interesting topic. Now, I also, in terms of sort of the metaphysics of the voice, I find it interesting, some of my past experiences involving, when I did experimentation and psychedelic experience, how my voice would change with that. There's one story in particular that really stands out where I did a little bit of that dimethyltryptamine stuff one time. And as I was in the experience, I went way up into, higher realms of consciousness. I saw the spinning Buddha mandala and all that. And there was there's always a frequency here that ramps up to a high pitch whenever you're ascending the scale like that. And as I was finishing up the experience, as it was winding down, the tone actually started to wind down. And no, actually it went the other way. It started as I got shot back towards my body, it started at this really low point, and it went from a really low point to a really high point. And it was kind of a long sound. And then as it peaked, hit the crescendo, I sat up off of laying down on the ground and I looked around me and the people that were with me kind of were like, whoa, dude. Because apparently the sound had come out of my body. I thought I was just hearing it, but it came out of my voice. And it was pretty wild because the tones that came out of me were far below and above in terms of range what I could normally do with my voice. So just a little anecdote about, how our voice reflects, and maybe, it reflects alterations of consciousness, but maybe our inflection affects our consciousness, alters it. Little poetic improvisation for you there. Lots of ways to support the show, though. If you like what I do and you want to help me keep doing it, I recommend Tippecanoe Herbs with the InnerVerse coupon code. Now, there's something you can get there really inexpensively. I talk about all the time. A little bit of calamus root. Can't see it very well in here, but it's like this sort of tan powder. I take a little finger dip of that. It charges up my voice. It's my secret weapon before I go on and have to talk for a couple hours. Very easy to acquire. organic calamus root. Try that out. I think that in large doses, it is actually psychoactive, but not in a small dose, unless it's like a microdose and I don't notice. While you're there, though, there's a lot of other great stuff you can pick up. Maybe some last minute holiday shopping for your health conscious friends and family. Yeah, pick out something nice for yourself while you're there. They got some great teas. Tippecanoe herbs, link in the show notes. Other than that, I think this conversation was a good example of why biofield tuning services are worth it and something you might want to investigate. So hit me up, Chance at InnerVersePodcast.com or InnerVersePodcast.com/sound-healing. All that linked in the show notes. And with that, catch you on the next one. Looking forward to a great Vibrant this week. Love y'all, especially those who show up for the live streams in real time and do the chatting. You guys are the best group on the internet. Love ya. Take care out there. See you next time.